Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Data Security in the Cloud. This is Yuri Budnik from RightScale speaking to you. We have what we expect will be some rather interesting content for you in this webinar. But before we begin, we would actually like to conduct a very short poll with some questions that will share the results with everybody right now to get a better understanding of who's participating in the poll and who's participating in the webinar, rather. In what they're interested in. So as you can see on your screen right now, there's a question there. Are you using the cloud today? As in infrastructure as a service, companies like Amazon Celestic Compute Cloud, the Rackspace Cloud, etc. Please choose one of the options there. And for all these questions, we'll share the results with everybody participating so we can all get a sense of who's in this webinar with us right now. So it looks from the results here that we are slanted towards people that are using infrastructure as a service. I would expect that since we're going to be talking about some of the rather important security aspects of how that works. So now the next question. Why are you considering a hybrid cloud? And in this case, you can select all the choices that apply. It's not just one. So we're interested in knowing whether it's for security reasons, for compliance, because you're using the public cloud, but you need workloads that are more sensitive and you want to keep them in a private cloud, or vice versa. You're using something private and you don't have enough capacity, so you want to be able to burst out to a public cloud. And yeah, just as we would expect for something like this, compliance and security are big factors here, so I'm sure we'll have some valuable things that we can share with you. And the last question, does your application have any compliance requirements? And again, you can choose more than one option here. So please select all that apply. And this is so we can all get a sense of the regulations that many of us have to learn about in design systems that can comply with. So interesting. I'm going to read into this that most people clicked on most options, maybe a little bit less for Sarbanes-Oxley, but very interesting. So with that, let me begin with the webinar. Do I have the right screen selected here? There we go. And on the panel today, you have myself that's speaking right now. I'm the director of the ISV Partner Program here at RightScale. I also have joining me from RightScale, or Director of Security and Compliance, Phil Cox. And from Trend Micro, Dave Asprey, the VP of Cloud Security. We're each going to cover some of the information on the webinar that you see right now. And we have Jonathan Curtin answering questions. And we actually welcome your questions throughout the webinar itself. On the GoToWebinar control panel that you have on your screen, there's a chat function. You don't need to wait until the very end. We actually carved out a whole section at the end to have time to answer the questions. But if you give them to us in progress, we'll actually look at them and figure out if we can incorporate that as we proceed. The agenda for today is the introduction that you've seen so far, and then we're going to have Phil Cox talk about data security concerns and the best practices and an overview of the implications in issues you might be facing with public, private, and hybrid clouds. Then I will speak a little bit about the RightScale technology and show you how some of the security concerns can be addressed via the controls that we provide in our management console. And then we'll move into Dave Asprey speaking about secure cloud and how you can use it to protect data at rest. And lastly, the Q&A, as I was mentioning before. And we're always very keen to interact with the people participating, so we look forward to that section. So I will now like to pass the presentation to Phil Cox, who is going to talk about security as an overview.
Thanks, Yuri. I appreciate it. To start with, kind of one of the things to at least my part of the webinar is that I'm going to be talking at a fairly kind of high 10,000 foot viewpoint, where I think Yuri and Dave are going to be talking about things that you can actually do stuff with. I kind of think about for the next 10, 15 minutes or so, we're talking about stuff that you really can't code, but that we need to think about. So kind of from that standpoint, we're going to cover common data exposures, some benefits of centralized management, and some unique security needs associated with hybrid or kind of cross-cloud environments. One of the things that I think what we'll find out is that security boils down from a practical standpoint to really securing the data and securing the system. So we're going to talk about that kind of, again, a little bit more at the higher viewpoint. I'd like to make a line in the sand as we start. I would say that you can't totally secure the data without securing the systems. Next slide. So when we think about the real risk, right, we hear stuff, hyperjacking, clicking. We talk about there's all sorts of interesting things that are kind of out and about there. But when you look at what's really happening, why people are losing data, right, how people are getting broken into, it really comes down to poor application programming, or application development, poor system configurations, poor application configs, and bad user habits. All things that have been, I guess, the bane of security for years, right? It's not something new that the cloud has introduced, but it's something that we kind of, again, have to think about and look at. So where are the biggest risks? Same things that we typically dealt with in enterprises. And to caveat that, or not caveat that, but to talk more specifically about data security, right, we talk about poor practices, be it sysadmin, developer, or user. There really is no super secret sauce that people are using to break into stuff. And one of the things I like to point out is that if you looked at any of the high-profile attacks that have happened in 2011, and there have been a boatload of them, none of them, not one, was because of some super sophisticated, cloud-based problem. They all fall into that generic security problem. So we need to think about that as we're thinking about how do I secure data in the cloud. Next slide. So common exposure vectors that we need to think about, right? We need to, our data is exposed in transit, at rest, and in process. So because data security relies on proper controls in those things, right, or I should say, in order to secure our data, we have to have proper controls with our data as it transits, where it sits, and as it's processed. These places that data are exposed have to have controls that are specific for them or adequate for the level of risk that we see to our data. Next slide. So let's start off with, again, at kind of the high level, right, data in transit, right? We must protect data in transit. Why? Well, we don't want the bad guys to see or modify our data, right? We'd all probably agree with that. One of the things that people don't think about a lot is that unlike, potentially other protocols or other places in our life, we can't guarantee the path that our packets take across the internet. If you look at that little map of the internet traffic to the right there, right, your packet can originate in one of those end nodes and traverse any of those paths to get to somewhere else. So why do we need to protect it? Because we don't know the path that it's going to take from point A to point B, right? And lastly, why do we need to protect it? There may be regulatory reasons or contractual reasons that you have to, protect that in transit. We'd all like to say, yeah, the reason I'm doing things is because it's just good. But we know that a lot of the money or effort spent on security is driven by regulatory or contractual requirements, not because we should be doing it. So it's just the reality. That's the why. What's the risk? Sniffing along the path, modification of existing data, or injection of new data. Common solutions that we see, application transports like SSL and TLS, virtual private networks, and application level data encryption, which is typically you kind of, some type of custom roll your own data protection. One of the interesting things that, I guess I want to point out is that there are tools, right, for that risk sniffing modification. There are tools that exist out there that are trivial to get, right? Sniffing their Wireshark, anything using the PCAC library, THC Parasite, for as far as modification and injection. There's like HPing, F22 Raptor, Packet, TCP Relay, LiveNet, etc. So the fact is that the risk is real in transit, and we need to protect it appropriately. Next slide. So we need to protect data in transit. We need to protect it at rest. Why? Same reasons typically as previously. We don't want unauthorized disclosure. We don't want unauthorized modification, and we don't want unauthorized injection. Right? We don't want stuff that wasn't there. What are the risks that we look at in a cloud environment, and as we think about securing data at rest? Well, the risks really are intrusions into, say, the guest or the instance, that expose data on the file system. So the system itself, remember I got back to, in order to protect the data adequately, in some situations you have to protect the instance as well, right? Cloud provider access to the ephemeral storage, like an EBS or a Swift volume, something like that, right? It is a risk. It may not have a very high likelihood, right? But it is there. And again, cloud provider access to the physical storage of other options, say an S3 or something like that. Those are the risks that we have to consider about data that's just sitting there, right? So what are some common solutions to protecting data at rest? Protection offered by the running operating system. File system access control lists are one of the very common methods that we use to that. What we're going to be talking about today in detail, and Dave's going to really delve into the solution and really what has become the primary mechanism by which to protect data at rest in the cloud, is encryption and associated key management, right? That's going to be a very, very important part of your data protection strategy within the cloud. And lastly, some common solutions are service level agreements and policies and processes of the cloud provider. I mean, that is one of the things that we look at. Oh, cloud provider has these type of controls in place, right? So I rely on that at some level to protect my data at rest. Next slide. And lastly, right, we need to protect, and I will say that this one doesn't get as much thought or discussion as others, because it's typically much harder to perpetrate, but still we need to consider it, right? We need to protect our data at rest. Why? Same thing. Unauthorized disclosure, modification, and injection. If I can get your data in transit, at rest, or in process, I don't care, because what? I got your data. So why do we? Because we care about unauthorized access for all intents and purposes. What is the risk when we think about process or in process? Data is in the clear in the memory of the instance, right? We may have data secured at rest. We may have it secured over the transport. But when you're using it, when it's sitting in memory, it is in the clear. So if I can get access to that memory, right, I can get access to your data. So the risk is, data in clear on the memory. Privileged users on the system being able to read the memory, the little graphic to the right, little debugger, right? Enable memory debugging. Let's see what's there. Privileged accounts on systems can typically gain access to that information that may be protected from them in other, in other forms, like in transit or at rest. And lastly, kind of the risk is hypervisor has access to the instance memory as well. We have to consider that when we're thinking about protecting data. Common solutions: protect the system that's processing it. Make sure there aren't people there that can, have high-level access, can, basically run memory debuggers and stuff like that. Limit that exposure. Protect the hypervisor, and again, a lot of that we rely on the cloud providers, right, to do that. So we need to feel comfortable with the way they're doing that and understanding the details of those. And again, from a practical standpoint, limit administrative users and who can, get to that, those systems. And one of the things I should, I guess, spoiler is, making sure that, local vulnerabilities are patched, right? If it doesn't do any good to have a vulnerable system that somebody can elevate their privilege to, and then you restrict them, they can run an exploit, they've got elevated privileges. So local, vulnerability management is important. Next slide. So where RightScale shines, and Yuri's going to be talking about the details of RightScale. Again, I'm kind of at the more 10,000-foot level. But RightScale can be used to ensure that poor system and application configurations are not what cause you to lose your data, right? That we're able to secure those systems, right? We can use RightScale to require data be transmitted securely, right? Be stored securely, obviously, and Trend Micro Secure Cloud as well. Ensure that systems are appropriate. Core technologies, and Yuri will go through these in detail, are write images, server templates, write scripts, and repos. One of the mottos that I'm championing is, for RightScale, build it secure, keep it secure. Next slide, please. So how do we build it secure, right? We use trusted images, use known configurations, script the install, get trusted sources or repositories. From a RightScale standpoint, what does that mean? We start with multi-cloud images that we know. We build with server templates, right? We modify with write scripts, and we build from frozen repositories. And in a sense, we can come up with a system that is built. I will say, one of the things when you look at that bottom box and the lock is that think of Humpty Dumpty, right? Secure is what you define it, the Humpty Dumpty rule. When I use a word, it means just what I mean it to mean, no more, no less. Right? So in that sense, you have to know what that secure box is for you. It's going to be different for different people. And again, utilizing those technologies allow you to build what you consider a secure box or something that meets your security requirements. Next slide. So we build it secure, we keep it secure, right? How do we keep it secure? Update the operating system, update the applications, and validate configurations are what we design them to do. How can we do that? You can use the same mechanism that's in your enterprise. Do you have a Windows Update service? How do you deploy packages and do vulnerability management for all intents and purposes in your enterprise? You can use the same mechanisms, right, within the cloud in your instances, right? You can use operational write scripts to do it, and I'll put in a plug. I wrote a blog post that actually just came up today about doing patch management within RightScale. Or the other thing, and this kind of it's similar to our partnership with Trend Micro, is that we have partner ISVs that specialize in these type of things. So utilize them. Look at them. Next slide. And lastly, from the kind of the big high level is what about hybrid or cross-cloud concerns, security concerns, right? The biggest one, right, is that you need to understand what the differences are in the security functionality provided by the clouds, right? This assumes that you know what they are and understand the nuances. May or may not be a good assumption, but it's important that you do that. It's important that understanding that you can apply consistent builds across them. Again, something that we at RightScale feel like we're pretty good at, right? And lastly, you may have to look at the physical protections offered by the cloud provider. They are likely going to be different from provider to provider, and again, you need to be able to evaluate that. So a quick recap, right? Most problems are low-hanging fruit and not sexy exploits. You need to secure data in transit, at rest, and in process. You do this by securing the systems and securing the data itself, right? When going multi-cloud, right, you need to consider the differences between the offerings, right? Now I'll throw it back to Yuri for some details on system and application management, utilizing RightScale. Then, Dave will do a big dive, deep dive on actual securing data at rest, again, biggest thing. So with that, Yuri.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was a great overview and primer on security and as it concerns cloud deployments. And as Phil was just saying, we're actually going to go deeper into securing data at rest. And some of that will be in the context of how it works within RightScale. So to that end, I think it'll be useful if I can talk about RightScale a little bit and give some background to the people on this webinar that perhaps do not know as much about how our technology works. So RightScale has actually been in the cloud computing business for just about when it started in terms of this idea of infrastructure as a service in cloud computing, and especially Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud that sort of kicked all this off. And we're working at a pretty decent scale already. We keep a counter in our homepage on our website. And if you look there, you might have noticed that we recently passed 3 million service launch, or launch on the behalf of our customers for their use. And that ticker actually is increasing the rate constantly every day, every week, every month. And that's because we're really powering the largest production deployments in the cloud today because of the benefits in simplification and automation that we bring to those. And we really work across all different types of verticals in industries. That's why I put up a bunch of logos there on the screen of customers to show that it's not really a particular niche. Anybody that's using servers, that's looking at cloud computing, whether public or private, can take advantage of the benefits that RightScale provides. And when it comes to cloud computing, by the way, sometimes people mean significantly different things when they say cloud computing. They could be talking about software as a service, or platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. And just to clarify our role, RightScale is software to more easily deploy and manage environments in infrastructure as a service clouds. We automate a lot of the processes of building out the environments, and we provide a lot of automation that makes it simpler to maintain those. And we're really working in that tier. And a big, useful, interesting thing for our customers is that we provide this choice of deploying in one or more infrastructure as a service provider. So you have the ability to choose a particular company today, say Amazon's EC2, and then move your architecture to perhaps a cloud you build in your own private data center that's powered by cloud.com, or in between two different public infrastructure as a service providers. Keeping your options open in the present and for the future ends up being a rather important part. We're really this orchestration layer. So if you look at the layer at the bottom of my logical diagram here, those are the resource pools that you want to be able to tap into. The Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud, the Rackspace Cloud. And at the top, you have the applications that you want to run into. So we provide the benefits by having things like a library of pre-configured server templates, so that if you want to deploy a database or a web server, you're not building those machines from scratch yourself, or having a user permissioning system so that you can control who's got access to what resources and audit and have an audit trail for all that, or having a lot of automation in terms of having environments where the application tier scales up and down based on load, on rules that you set. So again, it's an orchestration layer. It's really a cloud management system. And you use it so you can deploy environments like this, your classic three-tier architecture. Although this is a little bit more sophisticated. It's got a caching tier. It's got a database in a different geographical area for high availability. But really, at the core of all this is the idea of server templates, which is the pre-built server configurations that we provide. And that really lies at the core of RightScale. And if you look at the logical representation that I have on the right side of the screen here, it's got two main sections, the base machine image and the scripts. So a server template, if you compare it to a virtual machine, or what Amazon calls AMIs, Amazon Machine Instances, is different in a significant way. In a virtual machine, you bake everything into the image itself, and you can make as many copies as you want, but they're all identical. In a server template, we put just the basic operating system in the virtual machine or in the AMI. In fact, just enough for us to boot. And once a virtual machine stands up, we actually start running scripts at boot time. We call them boot scripts that install and configure things. So a server template is a combination of that base machine image and the scripts that would quite literally contextualize the machine for whatever role it needs to take in that case. So if you need a web server, you'll say you say boot CentOS 5.4, and then you have a script that runs that quite literally installs and configures Apache. Or if you want a database machine, markedly you have the same image, the same CentOS 5.4, but then you have a different script that runs, that installs and configures MySQL in this case. So it's the combination of those two things that creates a server template, the base image, and the write scripts or boot scripts that are very modular. So you can create lots of different server templates from the same images. And that's where a big security advantage comes from. No need to maintain lots of different operating system images and all the different patches for the applications that might require. You can have, and we in fact have quite a bit of customers that have one gold, we call them write images when they're running on RightScale, one gold write image for, say, CentOS, and they have lots of different server templates running on them because you can make it into a web server and into an app server, into a database. And in fact, we provide a whole bunch of these that are already secure from the beginning, as you can see from the diagram, CentOS, Ubuntu, Windows, or companies can make their own. So you can build your own image and then build your own server templates from there, or leverage the ones that we have pre-built, or even leverage scripts. You have the ability to, and you'll see this more during the demo and during Dave's explanation, drop in a script to do the volume encryption for secure cloud from Trend Micro. So if you look at an analogy, a virtual machine is really like a CD. You can copy as many times as you want, but you cannot make any change to it. And a server template is like a playlist where you can change the order the songs are going to play in, add or remove songs, and get a lot of flexibility from it. So now I want to take a moment and actually show you a couple of things in RightScale that I think will make it more interesting. So we're looking at the main dashboard. I'm logged in as myself into an account that we call production. And on the left side of the screen, we can see the cloud resources that I can access from here. So from this particular account, I get access to some Amazon resources and Rackspace resources. On the right side, I got my deployments, and that's a term we use to describe a group of servers that I can manage together. I can manage at the system level instead of individual machines. As you might have surmised, the color dot shows you what's running and what isn't. And you can even see how much you're spending on individual deployments. So in terms of visibility, think of what that means, being able to compare production versus staging versus development versus, Skunkworks projects. If I click on the Elasticity web demo deployment, it actually gives me a more detailed page about what's going on in that particular deployment. And it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close to the logical diagram I showed earlier of an architecture. Notice I can give all my servers nicknames so I can find them easily, and they're all based on server templates. So if I click on the MySQL 5.0 EBS for the people that know Amazon, and I go to the scripts for the server template, just as I was describing, here are the boot scripts that will run to set up this server when it stands up. And notice, as I was saying, it quite literally installs MySQL as you need it. Now this is fully configurable. I'm running this is a live machine, so I cannot edit on this screen, but I can delete scripts, change the order they're going to execute on, add some. As I was saying, you wanted to add secure cloud installation scripts to the server template. Quite literally, you can pick it from the library and add it here. That's, again, the flexibility and the automation and the configurability comes from this. Now, there's a one-to-one mapping between the cloud resources that I have in this account and here, and we have this ability to segment users and who's got access to what resources and what level of access. If I go to the top here, these are the different accounts that I, with my username, can access within my RightScale control system. And if I switch to RightScale Webinar, this account is tied to a different Amazon set of credentials and a different set of resources that I can access here. And I actually have a different set of rights, in fact, in this account. If I go to Settings and I go to Users, I can see all the different users that are authorized for this account, and perhaps more significantly, the different roles they have. So we're limited in time, and I cannot get into the specific details of each one, but there's a fine-grained control on who can do what on each set of resources, on each cloud account. And it's really easy to add more people. I just click on the Invitations tab, and I can click on Invite Users. You put in somebody's email, what rights you want to give them, and it's as simple as that. If you want to create a temporary user for a contractor, often for tech support reasons, people invite us into their account. You can limit it to the number of days. You don't need to remember when you want to revoke those credentials later on. So I'm going to go back to my production account, and I want to point out a few of the things that are useful for security-minded people. If we go back to this production environment that I was showing, realize that servers in the cloud come and go. They're ephemeral. They disappear when you shut them down, and all the data that was in the server goes back to computer heaven, and there's no way to get a hold of it anymore. So what do you do when you need to analyze something that was happening there? Well, we make that easier. If you click here on the History tab, we actually keep a log of every server launched or terminated and what happened on this particular deployment. I'm going to right-click on this and open in a new tab to make it a little faster. And if I go to this particular server, you notice here that I have a tab for log files. So we persist all this data, even for servers that were terminated hours ago, days ago, last week. I can still get into the log files and the console output so that I can analyze something that was happening in that particular server, as you can see here. Another area that's really useful in this regard is the fact that we keep track of all the configurations changes somebody might make. for the scripts that we keep talking about, they have inputs, so you can pass them values before they execute and make configuration changes. People might make changes to those values, deploying things as they're maintaining environments, so we keep track of all that, who changed what where, what the value was before the change. And also a history tab on every automated action taken by RightScale on behalf. Oops, I meant to click on audit entries. An audit entries list on every action taken by the automated system of RightScale on the behalf of any particular user, so you can drill down exactly on the details of what was happening, for what reason, and exactly how it worked. And this is a bit of a complicated query going to the database, so it takes a little bit longer. I was running it before the webinar, but you know how demo gremlins can be. So suffice it to say that you would see a detailed screen here of everything that was happening in the particular deployment, service launches, and terminating, and exactly what alert was triggering and why. Now, I'm running out of time here, and I'm only scratching at the surface, as you can tell, of the different security capabilities. I would like to leave you with one more, which is infrastructure audit. And let me go to the screen and show you what's going on here. I'm going to click on one of the particular infrastructure audits. So we have this ability to take a snapshot of all the firewall rules that you have going at any given moment. So this is for Amazon in this example. So all the security groups that you have, what ports are open and closed for each one, what machines belong to that. You can even see what's running there. And we can take a snapshot and baseline it so that if you have the environment configured the way you need it to, you can record that and then subsequently take further snapshots and compare them. You know how this, it's not just being secured, it's maintaining the security that's even a lot harder. So with all those changes, there's not a lot of transparency and the ability to actually monitor what's happening there. And we make that a lot easier with this capability. And as you can see from this button here, you can even download structured JSON data so you can import and manage it on your own. So that's just a quick overview of the kind of controls and transparency and visibility that we provide with the RightScale Cloud Management System. I would now like to pass the presentation to Dave, that's going to dive in a little deeper on the securing data at rest aspects of this. And Dave, with that, let me go back into presentation mode, and it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. This is Dave Asprey with Trend Micro, VP of Cloud Security. And I wanted to talk here about what are some of the specific security concerns that we see in the cloud. We're one of the largest internet security companies out there and the #1 by market share server security company in the world. So we get a lot of queries from large enterprises about what's going on servers in the public and in private clouds. One of the big concerns that we hear from customers is that data is mobile. In fact, we coined the term data motility, where we talk about the idea that data moves around without you knowing. When you run your own infrastructure, you pretty much know where all of your data is, at least if it's on a back-end disk, you can define that. When your back-end disk is in the public cloud and it's a black box, you've given your cloud provider the ability to move that data around at will. And they do that for performance and availability reasons, and there's lots of good reasons, but it leads to other problems, both regulatory problems, if the data is moved to areas where you don't want it to be or you don't know it's been moved, as well as general security concerns. One of those concerns that goes along with that is who can see your information. So even if you figure out that now you know where your data is, or at least you control it when it moves around within the black box, you have the question of, did your own people see the information, and did someone else see the information? One of the problems that happens in the public cloud, and multiple cloud providers have acknowledged this in public, is that sometimes cloud administrators do things they're not supposed to do. There have been examples from Google and Microsoft, sometimes human error, and sometimes even, we'll call it quasi-malicious behavior. Now, cloud providers are generally trustworthy, and they have good security controls and procedures in place, but at the same time, the old saying is trust but verify. So the idea that you can have control to see if anyone saw your information, even if they don't want you to see that, becomes very important in the public cloud. The next question is, who's attaching to your volumes? And this is different from what happens when someone might have just seen your information. But here it's actually, is there a rogue instance that attached your volume? And you run into the next point here, which is that visibility question about who accessed your data. So the first setting there we're talking about is who can see your information, which is a policy type of thing. And the second one is who did see it and did they match. Let's go to the next slide. The way the Trend Micro Secure Cloud solution works is that we've got a SaaS offering that we host, we run, that does policy-based encryption key management, or we have a virtual appliance that you can run in your own data center or even in the public cloud if you decide to do that kind of thing. Either way, the functionality is identical. What happens is that our service or our software holds your encryption keys for you, and as soon as something is provisioned at a cloud service provider, a new instance comes up, or even if that instance is provisioned in a private cloud, it doesn't make a difference. A request comes from that private cloud as it's turned on or as it attempts to attach to a secure encrypted volume. Request comes to our console or to our service, and we validate that request. We take a look at the characteristics underlying the system that's making the request. Is it in the right place? Is it doing the right sorts of things? Does it have the right processes? Basically, does it look and feel and smell and act like it should? And only then will we release the key. This is pretty different than the way we used to do it before we went to public clouds, because in the good old days, you could always use encryption key management with USB drives. You could make sure that the private key never made it onto the network at all. But you can't really walk to an Amazon data center and plug your USB drive in. They generally won't let you in the front door. So this new problem that says, wow, the ways I used to do it don't work, is sort of something that can really affect cloud security. And the only way that we could see as Trend Micro to allow people to have this encryption in the cloud but not allow the keys to be vulnerable was to put in this policy-based key management. And it turns out that this approach increases security not only in public clouds but in private clouds as well. So this is a best practice for managing encryption keys in general. Let's go to the next slide. Some of the policies that you can manage with this approach to encryption key management are identity-based policies. Ones where you can say, is it mine? And here you can embed keys. And you can also look for a specific location. So this means that, let's say that you're an Amazon customer. If you see something start up in a zone that you haven't defined as a zone where you're allowed to be running things, you can be pretty sure that you might have a rogue instance or a development version or something isn't right. So our policy engine here will catch that and let you say, wrong location, not valid, and you'll get an alert instead of a new instance that was able to access your encrypted data. At that point, you can either update your policies to allow that location, or you can figure out what's going on. This will prevent rogue instances from attaching. The second thing you can do is you can look at startup times. If you have, say, a backup process, or you have some other specific time-based windows where processes run, you can configure those. And what that means is that you're unlikely to get that backup process starting in the middle of the workday. By limiting that, you can make sure that if there is a problem with that process, or even if it's been compromised, that it's unable to suck your data up and put it somewhere else. And the list of things you can do with identity it's quite long. It goes from there. From an integrity perspective, this is really important. The first thing on the left here around identity basically says, are these my instances that are accessing this from the right place? The second thing on the right here around integrity is more about, okay, these are my instances, but are they okay? Are they running right? So here we can check, is there a firewall running? If there's a requirement in your policy that says no cloud instance can run and connect to my secure volume without an inbound and outbound firewall, we can check and make sure that that's the case. By the way, that is a best practice in the public cloud, and you should have an inbound and outbound firewall on every single instance you have. That's also something that we offer at Trend Micro. Same thing with antivirus. Best practice for server security, even not in the public cloud, is there should be an antivirus scan on every machine that you have. On top of that, you want to be able to do a self-integrity check where you can look at which processes are running and basically, does it look like there might be a rogue process or something that doesn't belong here? If that's the case, then you'll be able to trigger an alert, and you won't allow that instance to connect to your backend encrypted volume until you've been able to confirm that it's safe. Next slide. The way we work with RightScripts is pretty cool, with RightScale RightScripts, I should say. So what we do here is we seamlessly hook in where you can, say, install the app server software as you start out something. The script just makes that happen. And you can tie encryption into the overall scripting process. What you get there is the ability to dynamically configure your environment. Every time you deploy something, you can make sure that it's got the encrypted capabilities built in. And along the way, you get identity and integrity checking. This is what you do in order to make sure that your data at rest in the cloud is protected. And being able to script this in with RightScale gives you that full all three-tier protection where you need to have data in motion, data at rest, and data that's actually being processed, encrypted, and protected the entire time. The other thing that is worth mentioning here is that most regulations, and certainly most best practices, like the Cloud Security Alliance best practices, I'm a co-chair of the virtualization security group with the Cloud Security Alliance. And one of the things that's important there is your key management should not be sitting on the same server or even on the same provider as your encrypted data. And by offering a SaaS version of Secure Cloud, Trend Micro enables you to meet the compliance and regulatory requirements that say keys separate from data. We make that happen. Next slide, please. We're going to go ahead and start our demo here. What we do here is we're going to create a new instance in AWS US East. There we go. We're going to give it a server name. Then we select the image and the time. There we go. We've got the hardware name going in. And we're going to choose the security group that we want to run the instance in. Next, we add inputs for the Secure Cloud RightScripts. We'll be switching back and forth between RightScale and the Trend Micro interface here. We've got the AWS Access ID key going in, the secret key, and the Secure Cloud package name should be going in pretty shortly here. And we're going to switch to Secure Cloud in just a second here. There we go. So we switched over to Secure Cloud. We're getting the information we need for the provision passphrase here. And we're going to get things like, we're going to do this process twice, actually. We're going to go from Secure Cloud to RightScale to Secure Cloud and then back to RightScale. At which point, we're going to copy all of our settings back in here. And when we go ahead and we launch this thing, we're going to have it up and running. And you'll see that the state is pending here as the instance is being provisioned. In a couple of seconds, we're going to swap to the Secure Cloud a final time, and you'll be able to see that the state has changed to operational. Here's the operational state. When we switch to Secure Cloud, you're going to see that there's a pending key request from the recently created instance here. Here we go, running instances. You see the request there. It says pending. We're going to click on the pending request status to see that the rules, that one of the rules passed, while all the others are set to informational. We're going to go ahead and improve that encryption key. The Secure Cloud Key Manager then releases the encryption key to the Secure Cloud agent that's running on the EC2 machine instance. And now you're going to end up seeing the Amazon policies being set right here within our policy manager. One of the rules that you'll find really valuable is the ability to control access from a specific location. So for example, you'll create a rule that lets you have only one instance for a policy to access a specific volume in the US East 1A zone. This means that you can't have 2 or 3 or 5 servers connecting to that. You're also going to see that we set Secure Cloud either manual or auto approve or deny based on the policy here. And as you can see here, that the final step is that we've got the encryption key delivered to the Secure Cloud agent, and we've got the instance accessing the encrypted storage. So this was the world's fastest demo. We actually did this as quickly as we could to fit it into 3 minutes. But this is the entire process of provisioning a server, provisioning an encrypted key for it, encrypting the volume, and giving the access to the encrypted volume to that server, and then setting 2 policies for it. 3 minutes. Let's go to the next slide.
So
you can find out more.
I'm sorry, Dave. Continue.
So you can find out more by going to trendmicro.com/securecloud. You can go to rightscale.com/webinars and rightscale.com/whitepapers. I would like to point you also to cloudsecurity.trendmicro.com, which is a cloud security blog where I frequently contribute. And here you've also got blog.rightscale.com and the list of Twitter accounts for the people who are presenting today.
Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for participating in the webinar today. Actually, let me go back and leave this on the screen for a little bit. We want to go into the Q&A section. And Dave, I'll give you a moment to look at the questions you have there queued up, and I'll tackle the first question over here. And it's, I think it's useful just to clarify something. The question is, so what do I get from RightScale, and what do I get from Amazon, and what do I get from Trend Micro? And I'll take a first pass here, Dave. If you want to add to my answer, please go ahead. So Amazon quite literally rents you servers by the hour, as the people using it know, in terms of the infrastructure as a service provider that they are. RightScale is software. It's an orchestration layer. It's a cloud management system, and and we provide a lot of features, including configuration management, which you saw explained a little bit deeper in the server template demo and explanation that we gave. And we make it a lot easier to deploy the secure cloud technology into a machine without having to build things from scratch. So we automate and we facilitate the deployment of secure cloud software into the servers. But to buy the secure cloud technology, you actually need to go to Trend Micro and make an account on their site and buy a particular number of encryption keys that you're going to want. And then you're able to take that data and copy and paste it back into the servers you're protecting with RightScale to configure it really easily. That's what you were seeing in the demo. So it's 3 parties, and you do need to, we each provide different things. We just made them all work together really well, very easily. Dave, if you want to add something to that, or if not, please go ahead and tackle the next question you might have.
Well, the other question that was particularly interesting that came through was what keeps you up at night in terms of the information that you presented. What sort of keeps me up at night is we did a survey about 4 months ago at Trend Micro of 1,200 IT departments at companies with more than 500 people. 85% of those companies said that they were using encryption in the cloud today, but at the same time, most of those companies were still in pilot. Only maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 12% were in full production in public clouds. But of the ones in production, fully 43% of them had security, like known security problems or security breaches. And all of those companies we surveyed were expecting to have 4 times more applications deployed a year from now in the public cloud than they do now. So we're seeing kind of a state where people think they're protected in the cloud, and the apps that are out there, 40% or so, are not secure. And we're going to do 4 times that number coming up here. So this is something that just could be a tsunami of insecure apps, and that's what concerns me the most. 85% of them are encrypted, but they don't understand that their encryption keys, for the most part, are not protected adequately in the public cloud, because the old ways of doing that don't work in the public cloud.
So next question.
Phil, one of the things that I was going to say, part of the thing is I kind of jumping on your bandwagon right there, is that, you know, there is that paradigm and, you know, the understanding part of it. You know, I mean, when kind of, you know, as the director of, you know, security at RightScale and trying to help our customers kind of, you know, walk into this thing, it does seem like that kind of understanding gap from traditional IT, right, and kind of what processes and practices and everything, while, you know, the risks may not be significantly different in the sense that, you know, we've always had to worry about transit, at rest, you know, in process, those type of things. It's understanding where those nuances are as to how the technology deals with it, and that, oh, I need to go about, you know, actually implementing my control differently, or there's a different risk. So I guess I would just, you know, kind of rah-rah or cheerlead that, you know, that statement that understanding, you know, what you're doing and why you're doing it is, you know, kind of in that sense, what keeps me up at night, the thought that our, you know, customers don't understand kind of what's going on. So I, you know, just wanted to jump in there and say, you know, kind of very much agree with you in terms of, you know, where things are, and, you know, that it's certainly doable. You just got to be doing it right.
So I have another question here, and actually I'd like to remind the people in the webinar, you can use the chat function there to submit questions to us as we proceed here. Feel free to let us know what you might want to know more about. Dave, this is a question for Trend Micro. Is Secure Cloud FIPS certified, as in Federal Information Processing Standard?
Let's see here. We support a variety of different requirements. The question for these requirements is that the different requirements, different standards, oftentimes we meet the requirements for them, but it's a question of the regulatory, actually the specific auditor is approving that. When it comes to FIPS, our version 2.0, which is being launched in December, will be FIPS 140-2 certified. So it's not certified today, although we believe that it meets the requirements for FIPS. In December, we'll have the full certification.
Phil, let me read the next question, and Phil, I think you can be able to tackle this. Is encryption also used between database file content and database client application when you have the database on a cloud and the application on another cloud? Then parentheses, security between clouds, public or private or hybrid?
Yeah, so, you know, the answer, jumping back to my 12 years of consulting, would be it depends, right? Yeah, if you're transmitting sensitive data across, you know, open or untrusted networks, then it should be protected in some manner, whether you're doing it at the database level or whether you're doing it at, you know, at the, you know, kind of transport layer based on your, you know, SQL connections. And that would all be dependent upon how you deploy your systems. Jumping back to the RightScale, you know, reason for doing this, yeah, you know, what we would do is we would deploy those servers to require, you know, secure connections from either within database servers, server to servers, or require secure connections from clients. So I guess the answer is it depends on how you configure it, right? By default, right, you should be protecting data as it crosses, you know, open or untrusted networks. So jumping back to, people just need to understand, oh, look, I'm provider to provider. It is crossing, you know, the internet or, you know, something of that manner. What do I need to do to protect it? So it's certainly doable. It depends on how you configure it, and it is something that you should be doing.
And you know, I happen to know that we do have some customers using that kind of architecture where they have application servers in one location and a database in the other. For example, a legacy database is not in the cloud, and they want to take advantage of the application servers that can scale based on load and getting those as cloud resources. So I know people are putting into practice that kind of approach. Dave, do you have any other questions in your queue there that you want to tackle?
I think that there's a question around, you know, how many accounts do I need, sort of how do I pay for this, which is pretty important to address. So the point here is that you need a secure cloud license that you get from a Trend Micro reseller. We've got that stuff listed on the website. And you need one account to manage your encryption keys, and then of course you need your RightScale account. There was another question here that's coming up as well, which is, let's see, what types of encryption does Secure Cloud support? And we support AES encryption up to 256-bit key length, and with that you can do VM-level encryption of SCSI, iSCSI, NFS, and IDE devices.
So Phil, we got a question here. Let me read the question so you can answer.
Yeah.
RightScale has customers EC2 keys, which opens up some security holes, and I think they're talking about that in the general sense. I would call it more weaknesses, but anyway, what are your future plans to correct that issue? And I think we can address that head on, Phil.
Yeah. So this is an interesting point, and I've heard it discussed a lot. And at some level, it gets down to a philosophy or a kind of a philosophical difference as to whether this actually is a security hole. So the fact is that we have keys because we do management on behalf of customers. In short, we do that for them. That's why they pay us. If we didn't do that, they wouldn't need us. So I don't see that being an issue going forward. The question is should you trust RightScale? Right? Do we have the processes? Do we protect those keys? Do we protect them in a manner that is commensurate with the security level you have? And there are some detailed information and some facts that I'm developing that's going to be addressing that. So the answer to the question specifically, right? RightScale has customer, AWS or EC2 keys. Are we planning on changing that? The answer is no, not that I know of. But I would say that I think the discussion should be, okay, you've got the keys. What security risk does that pose to an organization? I think every organization should ask that. If I was not at RightScale and I was using RightScale, I would ask that question. It just so happens that I know the answer to that, at least from a RightScale response standpoint, and I feel like we can adequately address the situation. There are other things that we are doing. If we jump out of the AWS key in particular into credentials, database keys, things that are used in application deployments, things like that, we are working on basically a credential store that can be hosted on site or by a customer themselves. So we are walking down that path of being able to provide that that functionality to them. But at some level, we're a trusted partner, and at this point, that trust in what we do requires that we have have those keys. So, and I guess I would be more than happy to discuss this with anybody who's either on the webinar or has questions about that. Just my Twitter handle and different things are there. You can also send a question to securityguy@rightscale.com, and I will get it, and we can have that discussion.
We actually have your email up on the screen right now, Phil.
Okay.
For people to see. So I see we're running out of time. We're at the top of the hour here. Dan or Phil, you have more questions that you want to tackle, or should we be drawing this to a close now?
I would like to say one thing, again, coming from kind of my background, is, we've talked about a lot of this stuff and what works where and how you do it and all of this stuff presumes that you've taken the time to figure out what your security requirements are and that you're adequately protecting that information. I mean, we talked about securing data in the cloud. Well, the fact is that there needs to be, you need to define what that is for your organization. So I would say, we've talked about technology, RightScale, Trend Micro, Secure Cloud. I think it's all good. I think to start it all off, people need to look at it and say, what does this really mean? What level do I have to have? And then find solutions, hopefully RightScale, Trend Micro, Secure Cloud, that can meet those.
Thank you, Phil. Very well put. It's more of the philosophical approach of how to think about security and how to tackle that as opposed to getting caught in one particular detail about it. And I would like to thank everybody for participating in today's webinar. You can see from the screen we're making our contact info available to you. We do want to hear from you. We realize that this is in many ways a conversation and people are gathering facts and trying to understand the problems they're trying to tackle and what solutions they can apply to them. So we welcome the conversation. That's why we're letting you know how you can get a hold of us directly. And by all means, reach out. Also, I would like to tell everybody that was on this webinar, if you have colleagues that you think might find this interesting, we actually recorded this webinar and we will put up the video recording of it by tomorrow on rightscale.com/webinars. So you'll be able to download that, access that, have other people review it. So with that, I will bring this webinar to an end. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I look forward to speaking to at least some of you in person sometime soon. Thank you.